there's times that there's stories that you don't want to share with your significant other. You want to look amazing in front of them. You don't want to share all the crap that was your life. And that makes sense. I didn't want to do it either. And when you go there and discuss like some of the things underneath it, you realize that the decisions that your spouse is making that you're kind of scratching your head going, why in the hell would they do that? Are actually like, oh, okay, if they went through this type of experience and saw this again and again and again, it would make sense that they make that decision because, oh, if I had that going on, I would probably make that decision too. And it just changes the dynamic of the conversation because now we've taken this money conversation from a source of, why are you not wanting to help me, to a source of, oh, it's not that you don't want to help me. You just see this very differently. And those are two very different conversations with very different outcomes.
Welcome to the Love Coach in My Pocket podcast. I'm Whitney Kobrin, a dating and relationship expert and love coach, but I wasn't always an expert. Far from it. After battling years of heartbreak, I finally cracked the code to love. And now I'm here to share that hard-earned wisdom with you. You're in for a treat, getting the guidance you never learned growing up, whether you're here for practical dating tips, expert relationship advice, or deep talks on healing. This podcast is your go-to resource for lasting love. Get ready to feel uplifted, inspired, and empowered in your love life. Hello, welcome. I'm so excited to have this guest here with us today. Angie Carlson is a financial coach, and she specifically mostly works with couples, really helping couples to communicate well and understand each other and get past the inevitable conflict, right? Most couples fight about sex, money, kids, and just a few other things. So I'm so excited to talk with you. Angie, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Whitney. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you got started in becoming a financial coach.
Sure. Well, I've grown up, I've always been kind of a money / finance nerd, majored in math and communication, and always done the budget, things like that. Met my husband, who had a very different financial background than I did. He watched some divorces happen. My parents were married till death did they part. And so getting married with those backgrounds definitely had their challenges, because as we would communicate with each other about money, we would use like the same words. And these words had very different meanings and connotations and experiences behind them. So while we thought we were talking the same language about money, we actually weren't. And we held ourselves back for a decade. And so out of all that is what came my coaching program, Agree and Achieve, which is where I help couples who can talk about anything except their money experience less stress in their relationship with more money in the bank. And how we do that is we go in and really work on aligning their vision for their short-term and their long-term goals. We agree on, okay, what are the priorities that we want to start with? Because if we try to do 20 things at once, we're actually going to accomplish nothing. Where if we focus on 1, 2, 3 things at a time, we can get those done. And then really, okay, what does achieving these priorities look like? Because inevitably, you're going to have that car repair. There's going to be someone who gets sick. And so how do we keep working towards our financial goals when those situations happen in our life, and know that our plan and our relationship is solid enough to handle it?
That's amazing. And so you guys were able to work through that.
We are now 100% debt free. House is paid off. We've switched jobs. We used to work opposite shifts for 12 years. He was night and weekends in hourly retail. I was out of college. Now I work from home. He has a job that he's home by 2 p.m. every day. Kids get out of school. And while I work from home some nights, I'm home. And so we have a totally different life. We have a totally different relationship. And I mean, we just look back and it was hard. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was hard. And we look back and we're like, it was so worth it.
Mm-hmm. What was really hard about it?
What was hard about it was just the sacrifices that we made, like working opposite shifts to save on daycare. And we look back and we saved about $50,000 on daycare. So, I mean, we could see the savings, but I mean, just not like, he would get home at 11 o'clock at night. I'd be in bed. So then I'd go to work all day, had the kids all night. Like, he'd be home and and he would do the housework and things too. So it wasn't like we didn't help each other, but like he felt like he never saw the kids. I felt like I was ragged. And it was just really hard to communicate when you have someone literally working every day of the year, because his schedule had holidays on it too. So it wasn't even like we had the holidays off. We had maybe like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and one other holiday a year where we both were even home at the same time.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and, and our kids, they're now 14 and 10, but growing up, they just remember mom and dad were never together.
Mm. And so how have things changed now?
Oh my gosh, things have changed where we can talk about pretty much anything. Like now that we've cleaned up our money, we can talk about anything. We can see challenges a lot sooner. We can spot when the other one feels off. We can tell with our kids, they're like, oh, this held our marriage back for a while, and we see this developing in our child. So, okay, and they're kids. So obviously we're not going to do a lot to address it, but just kind of be aware of it as they get older, to start, what do we want to teach our kids? What do we want them to see? And what we've noticed in our children too, from what we did to teach them about money, is that they now go to school and they're just like, wow, we recognize that our friends live in financial challenges. Wow, we realize that other families really struggle. And thank you for not having us struggle and like not having our stress too. Like with the pay for a house, my younger son was hearing, people talk about someone being homeless, and he's like, I don't have to worry about that. He's 10. And it's heartbreaking to think of a 10-year-old going through that. And it's also cool to think like my 10-year-old realizes like, wow, my mom and dad have made my future really stable.
That is so amazing that you're able to do that, because, all of us coaches, we work with adults and we realize that they have these belief systems planted at a very young age. So when we can show our kids positive habits and outcomes and conversations around money, around relationships, around sex, around whatever it is, we're giving them such a gift, right? I don't think anyone ever raises a child perfectly and no one comes out completely unscathed. I like to say we all come from families that are dysfunctional to some degree, some more than others. But what a gift. I know when I was growing up, I remember my mom calling the bank and like checking to see if the check had gone through yet and hoping that it hadn't, and trying to float for days because she hadn't gotten paid yet. And, I know that I carried some of that financial stress and belief system and worry into my adulthood. And it's taken some conscious work to look in and change those things. And I love how what you're doing is not only working with an individual, because that's important, that's huge, but within the dynamic of a relationship.
Yeah. And that dynamic adds its own challenges, because there's times that there's stories that you don't want to share with your significant other. You want to look amazing in front of them. You don't want to share all the crap that was your life. And that makes sense. I didn't want to do it either. And when you go there and discuss like some of the things underneath it, you realize that the decisions that your spouse is making, that you're kind of scratching your head going, why in the hell would they do that? Are actually like, oh, okay, if they went through this type of experience and saw this again and again and again, it would make sense that they make that decision, because if I had that going on, I would probably make that decision too. And it just changes the dynamic of the conversation, because now we've taken this money conversation from a source of, why are you not wanting to help me, to a source of, oh, it's not that you don't want to help me, you just see this very differently. And those are two very different conversations with very different outcomes.
And what I see here is that what you're doing is you're taking a very stressful conflict and turning it into intimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you mind if I give an example of that?
Go ahead.
So like if a couple is talking about the budget and they're just resisting and they can't even get past the budget, the natural assumption is, wow, either, my spouse wants to control me, they don't care about the money, they're just going to la la land thinking it's going to figure out, where in reality, one may have a story that's like the one went and did everything they wanted and told their spouse like, hey, you can't ever do anything for you and the kids. And so that person saw the budget as a weapon and was like, I am never doing a budget because I don't want that stress on my marriage. The other person watched a foreclosure as a child and was really scared going through a season of homelessness. And to protect their family, their decision is always, I'm never going to be without a budget. I'm probably going to have one done years in advance. So when these two marry each other, don't tell each other the underlying story and they keep trying to have conversations about a budget, I think everyone listening to this podcast can clearly see how this budget is turning into a fight, how the answers that each spouse has provided are very valid and very real. And until they get to the underlying issue, this marriage more than likely isn't going to make it.
Yeah. And you were able to help them see each other's point of view and work together?
That's what I do with couples. These examples aren't specific to any couple I've worked with. I just use them to make it easy to see. But yes, this is the type of work I do with the couples, is going to underline and if we're having financial resistance or we've made a pattern of decision that the one spouse is like, I can't imagine not making it. And now the other spouse is like, I feel really resented because I feel like I was not prioritized, or I wasn't consulted, or I said yes and didn't realize it was this. And so just coaching through the mindset of, okay, the decisions made, great. Just tell me more about it and let's see what comes up. And then there's times too that, it impacts the intimacy. Like normally the intimacy improves as a byproduct. Their communication improves as a byproduct. There's more money in their bank account as a byproduct, because as humans, we don't want to sacrifice if we know we're not going to get the result. And so if you and your spouse are fighting about money, of course you're not going to sacrifice to help your spouse win because you're worried that you're not going to get what you need. Of course your needs are going to come first.
Mm. Yes. And isn't that how almost all couples fights go? Is one person has their point of view and their experience, and then another person has their point of view and their experience. And assuming that neither person is lying and manipulating, which can happen, but even if they're earnest and honest and telling the truth and trying to work it out, they're often just trying to be right and trying to prove their point. And almost all the time, both people are right. And this is such a good example, right? Because of their background, because of their experience and their belief system, they're right. And yet the other person's not seeing it. And this is such a beautiful example of intimacy. So I think of intimacy as simply vulnerability meeting acceptance. And so when we don't want to be vulnerable with our partner, we want to hold that close. It's usually the things that are the most important, that we're most fearful of, right? Money incites a lot of fear, the fear of not having it, the fear of losing it, the fear of not managing it well. I'm sure that you've heard it all.
I've heard it all, but every day, it's just different.
But that's so beautiful that we can take something like that, and just by being vulnerable, just by sharing these stories that we're embarrassed about and don't really want to share, it allows us to see deeper into the other person. And when we can accept that vulnerability, that is literally the definition of intimacy, an intimate connection.
Absolutely. And you don't feel so alone, because I know, at least in my experience, there'd be times I didn't want to share anything. So I'm like, am I the only person who's gone through this? And I mean, I have a math degree and I have done so many stupid things with money. And I'm like, am I the only person that works in the finance field that's a financial idiot? And I mean, I had that thought go through my head until I worked in a retirement center where I would watch my coworkers tell people, hey, don't cash out your 401k while they're on the website processing their own 401k withdrawal. And it was like, oh, there's so much that goes on inside our heads. And I'm the only one in my brain all the time. And so for me to expect my husband to read my mind is really unfair to him, because one, he's probably not going to get it right. And two, I'm going to be more upset with him. We both lose. And so me trying to put the words to what I was feeling was hard, because it's like, yeah, my emotions, I can just lash out. And that doesn't help my husband, because he's like, I want to come alongside you. I want to help you fix this, but I don't have a clue what it is. And it was hard because I couldn't put the words to what it was either. And so really having to work through and realize, okay, as things are happening, what are those things and what does this look like? And it's like, oh, okay. And I still don't get it right. Like I still have a lot of work to do too.
Wait, you're human?
I know, right? And I still can look back and see things have drastically improved since we started on working on our money together, because we're living a life that we dreamed of having. We never thought we'd be capable of living the life we have now. We're in our 40s and we're young enough to enjoy it. We're young enough to have our kids enjoy it. And now we're just like, oh, we hit our goals. Like, what's that next level set of goals? What are the skills now that we need to elevate? Because once you have all your debt paid off, there's not really a checklist of how do you live your life without debt, because it's options. And a lot of the options we have, or nearly all of them, are great, fantastic options that are going to enrich our life. How do you choose between 10, 20 fantastic things? And so that's the other part of the coaching I do too, is just you've done the work to get here. And if you have, if you're 100% debt free and you still feel like you need a work free job, that's not okay. If, you're making all this money and your wife wants to stay home with the baby and you're sitting here having anxiety with $3 million net worth, we need to have a conversation about that, because so the money's just always a reflection, regardless of how little or how much you have, of what's going on in your internal world that needs to be worked on. And when your money is disappearing out of your bank account, it's not like, oh, I don't know where my money goes. It's like, that might be true that you don't know where your money goes. And there's things that you're doing that's causing your money to disappear. When we find those things, then we can have improvements. And that's why with my couples, some of them, I don't start with a budget, because some of them do the budget kind of like they talk to their friends. They only want to do it as a highlight reel. And if your goal budget is to not spend any money eating out, I can promise you that's probably not going to happen. And so what's going to happen? You keep doing a budget with zero for that category. You're going to go over. You're just going to be like, I don't get this budget thing. And you're going to peace out. But in reality, you're just not making your budget be realistic to what you do. And that's the point, is with the finances, is have a realistic picture of what's going on, like, and then make sure that you're tracking to it. But for some people, we just need to stop some of the habits first, because the budget's just going to add to the frustration and actually make the habits worse instead of better. And most financial coaches will not tell you this. They'll just be like, let's start with the budget. Let's start with the budget. And like, the budget is such a source of frustration for people that why would I reach out for someone to help just to be told, oh, I get to live in my frustration? Why would you even pay for that? You're not.
Yes. I heard recently someone said, we don't hire coaches for information. We live in the information age. It's everywhere. If you want to learn how to make a budget, you could Google search that. But we hire coaches to implement, to change our behavior. And I'm curious, how do you set people up to have these small wins so that they don't set big, huge goals and then get overwhelmed and stop?
Yeah, so I would recommend, if they're looking to set some smaller goals, I have a ton of content videos on my business Facebook pages at Finance Coach AZ on Facebook and Instagram, just to give some small shifts, and also just to open up the mindset to be like, well, maybe how I look at this is the thing that needs to be changed, instead of making more money. Because some people think, oh, making more money is the way out of my financial problems. But then if they come to me in their 40s or 50s, more likely they've gotten at least one raise since their 20s. And their debt is significantly higher than their 20s, even without the mortgage. Okay, so we have just proven that making more money doesn't solve the challenge. So if we keep looking at this as the solution, and we keep trying to implement the solution, we're just going to get more frustrated and more frustrated. And so that's more of what I try to show people, is not that what they've done is wrong. I mean, it makes sense that you think that making more money is going to pay off your debt, because you're looking at it as a math equation, and that math equation works. But the math equation doesn't have the decisions and the behaviors in it that are needed to make the math work. Because finances are so much more than 4 + 5 = 9 consistently. And really kind of providing small mindset shifts in my content to start separating the two, so that people are kind of like, oh, okay, I can see where this is different. And then like what I described about the budget earlier and the two different mindsets. Oh, well, yeah, I can see how that couple would fight about it, but I wonder if there's something like that going on in my relationship. Just to kind of provide that gap to be like, oh, well, yeah, and here's someone that can really help me, because she understands that there's different ways to look at the finances than the numbers. There's another angle we can go at this that we haven't thought of. And then when people do that and go look at the numbers, they completely transform. I mean, I had one couple, they started to work with me. They actually paid me over their car payment to do their first session. Less than 120 days later, they paid off $35,000 of debt.
What?
Right, I know, right? Like that is the reaction. And it wasn't because of more money coming in. It was because we totally changed how you look at it. And then when you see that your goal is attainable, now you make different decisions to reach the goal.
So when you see that your goal is attainable, you make different decisions to reach that goal. Are
Correct.
those decisions like in what we're spending and where our money is going, or where we're investing, or what kind of?
It's a combination of things. So like, if you don't think that you're ever going to win with money, you are going to keep the RV to go summer camping because that's important to you. And you're like, well, I'm not going to get this otherwise, so I'm going to do it. If all of a sudden you start seeing your communication improve, your debt go away, and you're close to reaching your goal, you might have the thought of, hey, let's sell the RV and just sacrifice the summer and just get this done and get the stress gone and buy another one next summer. But you're not going to do that if you don't think you're going to reach your goal, because that would be insanity. But if it's possible, and now you're like, oh my gosh, all these sacrifices, not only are they going to get me to my goal, but I see a way that I can get all this stuff back when I reach the goal. Now you're willing to make different decisions than what you considered even 2 months ago, 3 months ago, because if you're on the path to winning and you know that winning is going to happen and you want to sacrifice for that goal, that's the flip that is like, I will do anything to win.
That's amazing, because you said something earlier about sacrificing and deprivation and how hard it was. And I mean, isn't that what a lot of people think about when they think about budgeting and fixing their finances and paying off debt? Is they just think about the deprivation and the sacrifice.
So with the mindset around the deprivation piece of it, it makes sense that your brain goes there because that's what you initially see that you have to do to get there. And when you look at it as a form of deprivation, I don't want to be deprived. That sucks. And it's really more of, okay, how much longer do I want to live this life that I feel like I can't do anything unless it's payday? I am so stressed about the bills that I can't sleep. I'm up at 2 a.m. to pee and giving my spouse the stink eye because I'm so stressed about money. And you just assume that's going to be your life till you die. Or it's like, oh, I can start seeing a few things that might be able to change the needle. I don't know if I'm going to execute them by myself, but I wonder if that really can help me. And that's where the power of having me by your side comes in, is that I'm not emotionally attached to your financial situation. And that's a good thing.
Because we don't realize how emotionally invested we are in our financial situation, our money, our savings, our income. It's attached to our worth. Literally, we think that our worth is how much we're worth financially.
Yeah, well, it's a benefit because typically when couples work with me over a 6-month period, we typically see something really awesome and we see something that's really devastating. And typically the devastating one happens first. So like, I have a couple clients right now that are going through a job loss. Obviously, emotions are charged. We're losing our income. We don't see where the next job's coming from. So it makes sense that you're panicking and freaking out and wondering how long this severance is going to last. Those are appropriate reactions to the situation. And when you show up to interview for your next job, you can run the risk of being lowballed because you may come off as desperate in your interviews. Desperation's a pay cut. And so how do we work through knowing that you are the type of person that no matter what, you are going to figure it out. You are going to adapt. You are going to succeed. You are going to find the best company that can hire you. And that might, you may have to take something in the interim while we're still working there. But long term, that's where we're going. So like when you're got your money taken care of or you're laid off and you've got 8 months of expenses in the bank, how different do you interview? How much easier is it to make decisions, to have that space of being like, I don't have to worry about how I'm going to pay the bills in 2 weeks. You just come at it with a different energy and a different insight, a different level. And having someone to coach you through it when you're stressed and you're frustrated, that tends to be when you make impulse purchases. Like, I need that new interview outfit from Amazon. I really just want to get a coffee to calm me down. I feel like I need to take this trip just to get away from it all because I am about ready to lose my mind. Even though that stress does go with you in your head no matter where you go on vacation. And these reactions to that situation are all very normal things. And they're also going to accelerate your progress backwards to what you don't want if there's not someone lovingly, gently pointed out. I mean, I'm very bold and direct, but I do my best to be very kind and very loving with that bold and directness. Because to me, I want somebody to tell me how it is. And even if I'm frustrated or upset with them for a little bit and I know it's loaded with truth, that's a lot easier for me to take than people just like patting me on the shoulder or patting me on the back saying, do what you want. It's going to be okay. We'll just figure it out. And not that you can't, but I want a sense of I'm doing the right things to figure it out. I'm on the path to make sure I'm not losing my house to do any of this, because what we forget in these situations is we are usually so far away from our worst case scenario happening, but we don't think of it in those moments. Our brain just goes to the worst case scenario.
Yeah, that's how we're programmed, right? To protect ourselves, to be fearful, to notice danger. It's just automatic. So that's awesome that you're able to be a voice of reason and let people see the reality of things instead of the way it looks through their emotional filter and from their past experiences. What about people that ignore their finances, that don't want to look at it because it's big and scary and complicated and overwhelming? And have you worked with those kind of people? Do you have any recommendations for people in that situation?
Yeah, I've had conversations with some of those people. They usually take a little bit longer to work with because there's some shifts that need to happen before they would be at a stage where working with me would be appropriate. And so the first thing that I do is just listen and emphasize, because they've gone through some experiences that have led them to the decision of this is overwhelming. Anything that you've experienced in your life is valid. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just, okay, we've had these experiences, and just looking at it through a lens of, are you where you want to be financially? And normally that answer is no. And then, and just really starting to probe and ask questions about, okay, where, like, do we want this to go? Like, do you think this is possible? And really just going in under the surface, because I am a coach. I do like to coach very deep, because to me, deep is where the transformation is. And yes, people come to me because they want more money in their bank account. They want to be that person that pays off $35,000 in 4 months. And all of that is cool. And if you don't have the skill set of really looking at the past experiences and decisions of not only how they've served you, but and how they're not serving you going forward, that's what's going to make the transformation temporary. And I don't do temporary. I want the transformation to be something that lasts.
I totally get that. And I'm thinking in my mind, and working as a matchmaker is kind of like doing it for them, like being the bookkeeper or being the accountant or doing someone's taxes or helping them with a budget and then sending them on their way. And what I found was people need more help. They need that transformation. They need to open up. If they're hiring a matchmaker, there is probably something going on that from within that is causing them to attract the wrong partners or stay too long in bad relationships or be way too picky. We need to go deep to help people really have a transformation. So I imagine once they work with you, they understand these concepts, they've worked through these. But then again, what do they say? Next level, new devil.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, once you get out of debt, now your fear goes from, do we have enough money, to how do I continue to stay out of debt? You save your emergency fund, and your fear changes to, I don't want to have to use it. You save for retirement, your fear changes to, what if I lose it in the stock market? You pay off all your debt and your fear changes to, what if I lose it all and have to do it again? Or what if I have to manage so much money and now I have all these relatives coming out of the woodwork? And so this thought process on the financial journey never ends. So, I can have clients who work for me for a season, and then 2 or 3 years later, they might be back because they're in a new season and are just like, I'm not sure how to elevate into this season. I mean, because anytime I ask someone, like, do you want to go back to where you were 2 years ago? That answer is always a hell no. And they're also like, that they feel that same level of fear and anxiety about their new situation as they had 2 years ago, because it's just as new and just as scary as it was when they started. And that's where I can come in and help them again through that season, because as a coach, I don't want to be in your life for 5 years. I want to give you the tools so that you're confident to do it. And if there's something that we need to come back and troubleshoot on, absolutely. I mean, that's why I have my coaches too. Are there things that you've thought about with your estate plan? And it's just more of helping bring up the awareness of things that just probably aren't crossing your mind that are incredibly important.
Yeah, these are the kind of things that are really important, but they don't always seem urgent, right? Like estate planning and what's going to happen after you die. And, being a widow myself and having been through what happens, it's really important, and at any age, because you never know what could happen. And it's a hard enough time to deal with. You don't want to be dealing with financial concerns and all of that as well, if at all possible.
Absolutely.
I feel like you should write a book, but I think you just wrote an ebook, right?
I did just write an ebook. It's called Beyond the Budget. And in there, I have 10 ways that couples can accelerate their money communication. So highly encourage you to download that in the show notes and encourage you to check that out. It looks like a long book, 45 pages, but it really is a quick read. I mean, you should be able to read it within an hour.
Awesome. Yes, it's carlsonfinancialcoaching.com, right? And then the Beyond the Budget book. Excellent. So another question I didn't ask you yet, because I'm a dating coach and I help people with dating and relationships, I want to chat a bit about when is it appropriate to talk about money, right? Because I would say probably not on a first date, although people might drop hints, but one of the most important factors of compatibility is that you value similar things. And I think people nowadays in this modern world, we're just basing it on attraction and similar interests and even geography. And people aren't diving into explore what people value. And there's a lot of different values around money. Some people love to save money and hold on to it and be stingy. And some people love spending their money and going on vacations. And I mean, there's a lot of different approaches, and it can definitely make or break a relationship. So I'm curious, when do you think it's appropriate or how to start talking about money?
I would definitely want to talk about money before getting engaged. I'm with you though, not necessarily on the first date. That would be really awkward. But as you can tell that the relationship's really starting to turn into something serious and you're thinking like, hey, this person's the one, that would be the time to start having the conversation, because it's also about valuing yourself and valuing your time. And if someone isn't on this, what you call the same page with you on this, and you don't think that you can come to agreement on these topics, I mean, because then if you marry this person, you get divorced. How expensive is a divorce, y'all? Like, yeah, it might, and talking about before the engagement's good, because then you haven't started the wedding planning. But even if you're engaged and have the resources to talk about it, and I do help couples that are thinking of getting married with some of these topics and conversations too, to just be like, this is the like investment in your marriage, to be like, okay, we've talked about everything that we could possibly about money before we started, to be like, yep, we know what we're going into with our eyes open. Because once you get engaged, the focus is on the wedding and the cake and the dress and the honeymoon, and you want to look forward to that time in your life. It's very special, and you don't want it to turn into a nightmare when you get back from the honeymoon to be like, my wife has 200,000 student loan debt. What? Like, that's all stuff you want to know before you put a ring on it, not after.
Yes. And I could see people really benefiting from working with you at that stage while they're planning for their wedding. I mean, weddings are expensive. I have one more question for you. What advice would you give about how to love your love life?
Just always assuming that your spouse is coming to you with intentions that you don't know about that are good for your relationship. Because when my husband and we knew we were in love, there was no signs of manipulation, abuse, anything like that. And when he would come to me, instead of looking at him as my enemy and thinking that he just wanted everything to go backwards, to be like, wow, there's something here that he sees that's so powerful for our relationship. He feels the need to speak up. I wonder what that is and how it's going to serve us. And when we started to approach our conversations from that lens, instead of the lens of we're nagging at each other, wow. I mean, just talk about the shift of just loving your love life and being like, wow, I have a spouse that cares so much for me that they're even willing to say things that are hard that I may not want to hear, because they want me to be the best version of me. And I'm the same for him. And it's just been a total transformation with loving our life. And then, now with the kids, it's, more arms around each other, more hugs. The kids are like, oh, mom and dad, don't, please stop hugging each other. Please stop kissing. And it's like, no, but this is a sign of a healthy relationship. And they also sometimes hear, like, if we don't quite agree on something, they sometimes hear us talk it out. And they're like, well, we don't like it when you disagree. And it's like, you know what? We don't like it either. And it's going to happen, because we're not clones of each other. And thank God for that.
It's really beautiful. Well, Angie, tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on social media, mainly Facebook and Instagram at Finance Coach AC. And I can be reached on my website, carlsonfinancialcoaching.com. And if you'd like to download the ebook, you can go to that website and click the link for the ebook and download that and get your copy today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angie. Until next time.
Yes, thank you, Whitney.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Love Coach in My Pocket, where we talk about love, dating, relationships, healing, and all sorts of topics related to these. Don't forget also to download the Love Coach in My Pocket app from the App Store for tons of free resources to support you on your journey.